Welcome back, everyone. This is week 47 of Our Mothers Knew It. And this is our second of our 3 weeks studying the Jaredite nation. So last week we learned the origin story, and we sort of left on a cliffhanger where they have these beautiful glowing stones and this illuminated testimony of the Lord, and they have the barges, and they're almost ready to set sail. Well, this week we're going to go from chapter 6 through chapter 11, and you're going to actually see that adventure play out. You see the people get into the barges in chapter 6, and then all the subsequent chapters are what happens once they're in the promised land. It's just kind of interesting. It's really different than other places in the Book of Mormon, because you're going to see generation after generation pass really quickly. It's almost as if Moroni is trying to give us a Cliff Notes version of what happened to the Jaredite nation. And really, ultimately, he's trying to help us see that evil is real, but that evil should be done away, that we should learn from these experiences and do things differently. Each generation that you study this week, each name, is an invitation to understand how people use their moral agency, whether they chose to act or be acted upon, whether they choose to lean into their temptations and their appetites, or they choose another road and find peace and prosperity. You get to see that pattern over and over and over again. And it's just this invitation to choose for yourself. Choose the road that will lead to real joy. And you see Moroni sort of laying out our options right in front of us. The other thing that came to me this week is I really think this is a week all about loyalty, where your loyalty lies. I heard Brother Wilcox on Instagram this week talk about loyalty to God. And it kind of hit me as I was studying this week that that's really what the chapters are all about. Who will you be loyal to? I mean, if you put it in President Nelson's terms, this is when he invited us to decide to whom or to what will we give our life. Who will you be loyal to? And the options are clear. That's what this week of study is all about. It's a lot of history. It's a lot of names, but it is intended to be that way so that we can come away from it with this bold understanding of what our options are and why we should choose one over the other. This is a week where you'll learn that prophets see around corners, as Sister Drew taught us. This is a week where you're going to see that the Lord is in relentless pursuit of his people, whether they listen to him and abide by his commandments or not. And you're going to see that any transfer of mortal power is temporary, because you'll see king upon king upon king rise and fall. And ultimately, every one of these kings is designed to help us see the true king better. And I promise you will. So grab your scriptures, grab your notes. It's time to get started. I know many of you know the drill by now, but for those of you who are new to the channel or new to the course this week, let me first welcome you and then tell you a little bit about what you're going to find. Each week, I try to provide 9 things that I loved about this week's study, and I give them to you in 3 different ways. So first, I'm going to give you some sparks. These are just ideas. These are verses that caught my eye as I was studying and what I did next, how I found out more about that verse or patterns that I saw between the chapters. I also try to tie this week's chapters to what we've just heard from prophets and apostles. Usually it's to conference, but it's also often to a devotional that I heard or an Instagram post that I saw from somebody recently that's in leadership. I try to tie all those together in the sparks. Then I'm going to give you 3 questions. These are just a series of simple questions to get you into your scriptures, to get you curious about finding the answers, and hopefully have some good conversations with the people around you as you sort of wrestle with it. Then I'll do a second video. That one is full of 3 object lessons. These are just fun, creative kickstarts to help you know how you could take what you love about this week's study and apply it to other people. This is sort of a hard week of study because of all the history and all the names. So I put a lot of time into the creative this week to try and make this week palatable and fun, both to you and to the people that you're going to teach. So you'll find that in the second video. But since I can't cover everything, I did want to give you at least a quick summary. This is probably one of the only times this whole year that I would advise you to watch the creative video first, or at least access the creative tools, because what I spent the very most time on this week is this map to the story that you find in Ether. So I created this timeline that's visual based so that you can see who is who and know whose dad is whose kid and see the different transfers of power. And it's big, you guys. It prints on one page, but you turn it into this big long one. If you have that, even just printed on one page and you don't put it together, if you have that next to you while you study, it will make things so much easier. But let me guide you through just the high level view of what you're going to find in these chapters. So first, you're going to start out in chapter 6. Chapter 6 is probably my favorite of all the chapters this week, because this is actually when you see the people step into the barges and set into the ocean. They just commend themselves unto the Lord, and they are at his mercy. And then you see his mercy in abundance, because there's these incredible miracles that happen in the water as they're on this almost year-long journey to get to the promised land. We'll study that pretty deeply, but that's 6. By the end of chapter 6, they've reached the promised land. The barge doors open up miraculously. All 8 of those barges make it and are at the same place at the same time. I don't even know how that's possible to happen, but they all get there because of the hand of God. And they just weep. It's this beautiful little section at the end of chapter 6 where they're so grateful to be together and to be in this new land and to see the protection of God that they just weep and rejoice and praise God. So that all happens in 6. By the end of 6, you see the brother of Jared and Jared are starting to age. And the people, they kind of come to their children and say, what do you want from us? And there's this sweet exchange, right, where they are offering themselves. In some interesting ways, I see patterns. It's kind of the same way the Lord came to the brother of Jared and said, what is it you would have me do? When the brother of Jared had these questions and these concerns about the barges, and the Lord said, what is it you would have me do? There's some things I can't do, but what would you have me do? That's sort of what happens now. Now that these 2 brothers have aged, their people come to them and ask for things. And you can hear the brother of Jared's nervousness about what they ask, because they want a king. And both the brother of Jared and Jared seem to mourn at that idea, knowing that it's going to lead to captivity. But people are sort of insistent. Sometimes I wonder if it's a little bit like Martin Harris coming to Joseph about those 116 pages. I don't know exactly, but they eventually say, okay, and a king is chosen. So that's all 6. The rest of the chapters go a little bit faster because this is where you see transfers of power. So in either 7, this is when you're going to see the first king emerge. He's anointed in the end of chapter 6, and then he rules in 7. And he's a great king, but it doesn't last long. Those transfers of power and the sons who get greedy, all that comes to be in chapter 7. You see that, essentially you see how Satan attacks family. One of the things I love about the Book of Mormon is that it shows so beautifully how fathers and sons can unite together over generations. It's just hard because in this batch of chapters, you also see how fathers and sons are the target of the adversary. And so you see sons turning against fathers and fathers turning against sons, almost in this weird flip of that prophecy that we heard from Elijah. It's this divide that forms. And you're going to see a lot of that in 7. You also see it in 8. Because 8 is where things get even more grisly. This is where you see secret combinations emerge. There's a daughter who's sad that her dad is sad, and she brings out the old records and finds that if he just turns to secret combinations, he can get the power that he wants. And so you see how that plays out and ends in sort of a destruction of a whole section of people. Then when you're going to get to 8 and 9, or get to 9, this is when you're going to see a different king emerge. There's all these patterns. That's part of the reason it's helpful to see this tool, because you can sort of see the patterns of righteous kings and wicked kings and what causes them. But you're going to see this pattern change in 9. This is when you have King Omer. So he's a righteous king, and he's warned in a dream that others are coming after him. They want the throne. So he leaves for a season. And then you also see these other great kings like Emer, who comes along. He's somebody who, even in his old age, he's going to see the Lord, and he is a great king for his people. Sadly, that doesn't last too many generations because you have people like Heth that come along, and he is profoundly wicked. And because of his wickedness, the people are wicked. And so the Lord then has to pull back blessings, and mortality rushes in. They get poisonous serpents among them and famines among them and all kinds of troubles because the Lord can't bless them in the way he wishes he could. So they feel the lone and dreary world in a whole new way in that chapter. Then when you get into 10, this is when Heth has died in the famine, and you see the next generations come. A lot of generations pass in chapter 10. And there's a few noteworthy ones like Riplakish, who is profoundly evil and he's kind of like that King Noah character from Abinadi's time, that he loves to tax the people. He makes a big throne. He's somebody that eventually gets overthrown, similar to Noah, because of his leadership methods. And then you're going to see a lot of transfers of power. 5 good kings that create this time of prosperity and peace in the land. And then the tide turns, and you see 4 kings who grow up in captivity, and even though they're descendants of this royal line, they have no real power, and they are raised in captivity, and the generations continue. And then you kind of have this ebb and flow of power between righteous kings and wicked kings all throughout that chapter. 11 is where you see things come back. There's a few different places this week where you're going to see the people divide. Satan loves to divide. He loves to separate. And so you're going to see this Jaredite nation divide. And then there's some key players who help it unite again. And some of that happens in 11 under Calm. He's somebody who brings the kingdom back together again, restores the power to Jared's descendants, and things get back on the right track again. Then you have others like Shiblon, who's righteous, but his descendants aren't, and his brother isn't. And it's just this battle of loyalty. At the end, you're going to see that this line from Jared gets distorted. If you're on the little guide, at the very end, you're going to see this sharp corner. And that's where the power has shifted from the descendants of Jared to this other side. And this is where you hear about Coriantumr. He's somebody we're going to study a lot next week. But he is someone that we're not exactly sure if he is of royal blood. It sounds like he is by the way he tries to claim the throne. But he is someone that sort of usurps power, and you get that at the very end. The interesting thing about that is what Coriantumr does is he puts the proper king in prison. He's in captivity his whole life. And in captivity, he also has a family, and his son Ether is born. So you can kind of see Moroni setting the stage. By the end of this week's study, you see this mighty prophet Ether, who would be in line for the throne. His grandfather was a king. And instead of choosing to fight for the throne, he chooses to fight for God. And he will go out and be this mighty prophet for the Lord. We just don't get most of his story this week. We're going to study a lot of it next week. But that sort of covers you from chapter 6 through chapter 11, so that you at least know what you're facing this week. Now let's get into the sparks to find out some more of the good stuff. Spark number 1, I call Driven Forth as a Whale. If you were with me on the live this Monday, we talked about one of my favorite verses from last week. Is when the brother of Jared is coming to the Lord and he's worried about air and light. And the Lord is trying to explain to him the things he can't have in this ocean-going vessel. That he can't have windows and he can't have fire. And he's warning him about what's coming. Because I really think the Lord always wants to tell you as much information as possible so that you can be an agent who acts, right? You can choose how you're going to respond. And so that's what he does with the brother of Jared. And then he says, he compares them to a whale. He says, "Ye shall be as a whale in the midst of the sea." This is Ether 2:24. And then in 25, he says, "And behold, I prepare you against these things, for ye cannot cross this deep, save I prepare you against the waves of the sea, and the winds which have gone forth, and the floods which shall come." I think what's cool is this week you get to see these prophecies almost, or promises. They're fulfilled by the Lord, because these winds do come forth. The winds that the Lord creates, they come forth, and they cause all kinds of havoc in the ocean that they are traveling across. But I love that visual of them being as a whale in the sea. Because to me, when you think of a whale in a sea, I always think of steadiness. Even though there's storms and turbulence and choppy waters, a whale is equipped to maneuver through that. Other things might toss and tumble and turn, but a whale just stays steady and makes progress forward, and almost doesn't seem to be concerned about the things around it. It's just going to move towards its destination. That's how I picture these barges. Because they are prepared, they are unafraid. So listen to the verses. This is this week's chapters, 6 verses 5 and 6. "And it came to pass that the Lord caused that there should be a furious wind blow upon the waters towards the promised land. And thus they were tossed on the waves of the sea before the wind. And it came to pass that they were many times buried in the depths of the sea because of the mountain waves which broke upon them, and also the great and terrible tempests which were caused by the fierceness of the wind." This kind of storm should terrify them, except they were built as a whale. They're being driven forth as a whale, meaning like, yes, there's going to be things that beat upon you, but you are tight like a dish. In fact, that's what you're going to see in the next verse. This is 7. "And it came to pass that when they were buried in the deep, that there was no water that could hurt them, their vessels being tight like unto a dish. And also they were tight like unto the ark of Noah. Therefore, when they were encompassed about by many waters, they did cry unto the Lord, and he did bring them forth again on top of the waters." I loved thinking about the different ways they were prepared as a whale. And you can go into the notes and learn a little bit more, but here's just a few of them. First, I love that they're tight like a dish. These 5 things jumped out at me. First is that they're tight like a dish. That part of the construction process would have given them comfort as they're being tossed and tumbled, because they know exactly how tight this barge is and that water's not going to come in. I love that they got to be a part of the gathering of the food and the provisions. I think that's part of the way he makes them as a whale. They had hands-on experience with exactly the stuff they brought into the barges, and they know how long it's going to last, so they don't need to be afraid. That's how he prepared them. They also have each other, right? Can't you imagine what this must look like and sound like? That these people have traveled together for months or years, right? I mean, if you consider from the time of the Tower of Babel, it's been years that this little group has been together, which to me is probably a lot like what we see with the pioneers crossing the plains, that there is a bond that forms among these family members and friends as they go through this wilderness together. So they have each other. And I wonder sometimes if they could communicate with each other in some way. Maybe there was a way that the barges could sing and that would echo across the water, because sound travels faster in water. So you could see how they would find ways to connect with each other. But the fact that they have each other is one of the ways they're prepared. Another way the Lord prepares them is by giving them a prophet to be with them on the barges. I think the brother of Jared doesn't just have illuminated stones, he himself is illuminated. And there must be some peace that comes with knowing you're traveling with a prophet of God. You don't need to be afraid in the same way. The same way that the disciples, when they were worried on the water and there was that great storm and the Savior is sleeping in the back of the boat, and he basically says, like, why were you afraid? I'm right here. Do you think this is going to sink with me on it? I wonder if there's some of that prepares them for this crazy adventure. But the one that I love the most, and the one that sparked for me the most, is the stones. There's this interesting batch of verses at the very beginning of chapter 6 that talks about the stones. And to me, they are this constant reminder of God's love. So this is verse 2 and 3. For it came to pass that after the Lord had prepared the stones which the brother of Jared had carried up into the mount, the brother of Jared came down out of the mount and put forth the stones into the vessels which were prepared, one in each end thereof. And behold, they did give light unto the vessels. To me, that's the first part. These beautiful stones that the brother of Jared molten, he now has them in the vessels and they're illuminating these barges. And then there's verse 3. 3 says, and thus the Lord caused stones to shine in darkness, to give light unto men, women, and children, that they might not cross the waters in darkness. Okay, this is just a Maria theory and may not even be remotely true, but I think it's really interesting to visualize verse 2 and 3 as two different sets of stones. Because I think it's interesting, and this is what sparked in the verse. It doesn't say that the Lord caused the 16 stones to shine, or even the stones to shine. What he says is, and the Lord caused stones to shine in darkness, to give light to men and women and children. When I started reading that verse and rereading that verse and thinking about them, the Lord preparing them to be as a whale, I started to think about, this is the Lord's pattern. The Lord doesn't just want you to have comfort as a big group. What he wants to give you is individual connection points, individual illumination that will give you comfort. So I could almost picture the Lord providing individual stones. Stones that you could carry, that were catered to your size hands and that could provide just the light that you needed at different times of day, or maybe even provide heat. I mean, imagine how cold it would get as you're getting tossed under the ocean and they can't have fire. So what if these stones were personalized opportunities to be illuminated and to find warmth? The reason I like that for this story is because I think that's the Lord's pattern in other stories. Like when you think about Adam and Eve, and when they are driven out, they're given something to carry with them, a personalized gift that they get to carry with them always to remind them of their covenants. And this coat of skins that God gives them is essentially like the stones are. It is something that they get to carry with them to remember the promises. And it gives them warmth and it gives them illumination in a time of a lone and dreary world. I just like seeing the connection points between the two. I especially like how it's phrased in the verses. This is 10 and 11. And thus they were driven forth, and no monster of the sea could break them, neither whale that could mar them, and they did have light continually, whether it was above the water or under the water. And thus they were driven forth 344 days upon the water. It's that driven forth that sparks to me, because it's the same word choice we use with Adam and Eve. They're driven out of the Garden of Eden. To me, that phrase driven out doesn't mean in anger or in rashness. It means I'm pushing you to progress. I'm guiding you towards where you're going to progress at a very rapid rate. And the only way you can do that is if you're in this uncomfortable world. With Adam and Eve, it was a lone and dreary world. With the Jaredites, it's this experience on this choppy sea for almost a year. And in both cases, they're given something to remember the promises. What I like, there's a beautiful, an article in the Leona magazine. I think it was in September. And it's from Elder Holland. And he talked about Adam and Eve and this gift of the garments of the holy priesthood, or what the garments of the holy priesthood represent in Adam and Eve's story, this coat of skins. And he talked about how they should be a piece for us as well. Because what Adam and Eve would have been so sad about is losing their connection to their Father in heaven. And these coats of skins that they were able to wear reminded them individually of those promises, that they could take comfort in those. And this is a portion of his article. He said, "It's not hard to imagine how Adam and Eve felt, because we too face troubles in this fallen world. We too have been separated from the presence of God, and we further distance ourselves every time we transgress. Like Adam and Eve, we have been given that same Savior, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, Alpha and Omega, the Son of the living God. And as part of the temple endowment, we have been given a sacred physical reminder of those covenants, a symbol of the Savior himself. In our dispensation, it's called the garment of the holy priesthood." What I love about this notion of individualized stones is it fits with me with what I see in the temple. Whether this actually happened this way or not, to me, what God offers us anytime we're heading out into a dark and stormy sea is an opportunity to hold on to illumination, warmth, individualized connection to him. And we find that through our temple covenants. As we honor those covenants, we have this opportunity to feel different about our voyage. That instead of being tempest-tossed and tumbled, we are as a whale, and we are being driven forth, not because he has forgotten about us or because he is hoping to make our life harder, but because he knows this is the best environment for us to progress. And so in that process, he gives us this gift back. To me, there is a really powerful connection point between what happens when they commend themselves unto the Lord and what happens with us in the endowment ceremony when you essentially make those same kind of promises to God, that you're going to turn your life over to him and do the best you can. And the promise back is he gives you this gift, right? You have this light to guide you. This is something that you have with you day and night, always, to illuminate you, to create peace in your heart, so that when storms come, you can feel driven forth, but as a whale. To me, there's connection points between this story and the temple all over the place. Part number 2, I call hoarders and helpers, because I think it's really interesting to see this pattern emerge in these kings. So after chapter 6, as tempting as it is to stay in chapter 6 and just enjoy the miracles and the goodness, you have to wait in to 7 through 11, because this is where the succession crisis happens. These people who are now in the promised land and have chosen to have kings, they get the results of kings, which means periods of bondage and captivity and periods of freedom and prosperity, and it just varies depending on who's in power. One of the patterns that came to mind, or at least that sparked for me, is when I was reading about Jared. So if you remember, Jared is somebody who's in line for the throne, but he's very antsy to get the throne first, or to get it faster, to the point where he actually conspires with a man named Achish, who's a friend of the family, to have his dad killed so that he can get to the throne faster. Interestingly, though, he's a good king, a righteous king, his dad, and he's warned in a dream that he needs to leave the land. So that creates a vacancy on the throne that Jared is more than happy to fill. So he plops himself on the throne and stays put. The only problem is he started this secret combination with Achish. Thanks to the help of his daughter, who's prompted this idea in him, they made a secret combination where they've made oaths with each other and with the adversary to stay in power. And that means he can't trust the people around him. In fact, he shouldn't trust them, because Achish, that man who was going to help him kill his dad, actually ends up attacking Jared. And once he's been married to Jared's daughter, he gets rid of Jared, and now he himself is on the throne. And here's this interesting batch of verses that tells you something about what's going on in Jared's heart. So this is Ether 8, 6 and 7. For so great had been the spreading of this wicked and secret society that it had corrupted the hearts of all the people. Therefore Jared was murdered upon his throne, and Achish reigned in his stead. And it came to pass that Achish began to be jealous of his son. Therefore he shut him up in prison, and kept him upon little or no food until he suffered death. I can't imagine how deep this cancer must be in Achish's heart, that he starved his own son. But it's hard to even wrap my head around that kind of evil. But I think what you find in the verse is the cause. Remember how we talked about this earlier when we were talking about secret combinations and the Gadian robbers? That I picture it as this cancer. It goes dormant for a season, and then it springs up out of nowhere. When Jared's daughter brings those records to her dad and says, "Look, here's a way you can alleviate your pain. Go back to secret combinations." The cancer is back. This tumor is back, and then now it is spreading. It's like it's in the bloodstream, and it is spreading to every heart. And it is such a fast-growing cancer that it suffocates the natural love of a father. And what Achish experiences here is how Satan feels. This jealousy and this hoarder mentality of power and prestige, and that he can't see clearly anymore. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of, we were watching Rings of Power, and I was looking at the Dwarf King. He sort of goes through this process where he's got this ring on and it makes him see things very differently, and he turns against his own people and his own son, and it corrupts the heart. And I thought it was so interesting. As I was studying these verses, another batch of verses came to my mind. This is why things sparked for me. Because right next to it, I started to think about Lehi and the experience he has at the tree. So remember in 1 Nephi 8, in that vision, he partakes of the goodness of the tree of life. If you look in the verses, this is 1 Nephi 8:12. This is Lehi speaking. And as I partook of the fruit thereof, it filled my soul with exceedingly great joy. Wherefore I began to be desirous that my family should partake of it also, for I knew that it was desirable above all other fruit. And then he describes looking for his family and calling out to them with a loud voice so that they can come and enjoy everything he is enjoying. And the more I thought about those two fathers side by side, the more I thought, maybe this story is designed to teach me how I know what my heart looks like. If I feel like Lehi, when I have something joyous or something that brings me delight and happiness, if my immediate reaction is, I can't wait to share this with the people I love, I can't wait to get this to them and help them understand how good it is, then I think my heart's in the right place. If I experience happiness or even just temporary delight in something, and my immediate reaction is, oh, I've got to guard this, I've got to keep this to myself, I don't want to tell anyone else about it, something about that hoarder mentality tells me that my heart is in the wrong place. And it almost became this barometer for me to gauge how I feel about things and whether I'm partaking of things that are just temporary happiness that's fleeting or something eternal that is lasting. Because I really think the things that bring eternal joy, not only do you want to share them, but you understand that by sharing them, they are not depleted. Remember I think it was in the New Testament, we did that object lesson where we took a candle and then you lit other candles from it. And we pointed out that the candle that you hold doesn't diminish every time you light another candle from it. It actually stays exactly the same and you lose nothing in the process. I think that's what conversion and testimony help you understand. That as you experience the joys of this world and eternal joys that last, you want to share them because there's no risk of being depleted from them. They have an infinite nature that stretches and expands. And so you don't need to hoard things close. In fact, I think it's the antidote to this cancer of hoarding power and greed and pride and all those things is charity. When you choose to give away those things and experience that extension of yourself, you have an antidote that fights back against that cancer, pushes it back, and fills you with so much good that the cancer can't affect your heart anymore. And you turn to your fellow men in that natural way that he hopes for you. I just love the understanding of the exchange. To me, charity is an exchange. It means I'm going to give up something that brings me happiness, my energy, my time, my talents, whatever it is that the Lord has asked me to do. And I'm giving it with the understanding that it can then be increased. That the joy that I'm offering or the goodness that I'm putting out into the world actually doesn't deplete me. It will invigorate me because it will either give me room to hold something more valuable or it will actually expand those talents and expand that time. I've seen both happen. And I think that's the promise that you see in these verses. You want to watch for the people who turn towards their own pride and greed and power and the people that turn outward, that give love and give service and give help to others and look at how their lives shake out. It's a pretty clear distinction. I love the way Elder Christofferson talked about this. This was in 2024. This is the February edition of the Liahona. It's called The Lasting Joy of Gospel Living. This is just a section. He said, God does not try to impose joy or happiness on us, but he teaches us how to find it. He also tells us where joy cannot be found. Wickedness is not and never was happiness. It is by his commandments that our Heavenly Father reveals to us the path to joy. President Russell M. Nelson expressed it this way. Here is the grand truth. While the world insists that power, possessions, popularity, and pleasures of the flesh bring happiness, they do not. They cannot. What they produce is nothing but a hollow substitute for the blessed and happy state of those who keep the commandments of God. The truth is that it is much more exhausting to seek happiness where you can never find it. However, when you yoke yourself to Jesus Christ and do the spiritual work required to overcome the world, he, and he alone, does have the power to lift you above the pull of this world. When I kept that quote in my mind, and I read through those many successions that happened between chapter 7 and chapter 11, I felt more illuminated. I could see those patterns. I could feel motivated to turn towards the people I love and to bring more charity into my life so we could do good in the world around me. That's what I felt pulled to do. It helped me wade through those hard chapters full of intrigue and drama and betrayal with a little more light and a little more application. I hope that happens for you too. Spark number 3, I call the Jaredite Renaissance. Because as hard as it is to wade through all these chapters of history, there are these bright spots where you see almost a renaissance, where the king is righteous and the people are thriving, and then everything else thrives around them. Industry thrives, fabrics get better, tools get better, and you see this rapid increase in what I would call technology, but in an ancient term, right? The things around them that make their life easier or better or more productive, they all increase. And I thought that was an interesting pattern, because oftentimes we read these verses about prosperity and we assume this is just the beginning of the pride cycle and they're going to, maybe they're hoarding all this gold and they're just going to fall to pieces. But in these chapters, sometimes that lasts generations where they are just progressing. Things are getting better, technology is getting better, and their lives are getting better. And I found myself delighted to see that this is the Lord's hope. I think the Lord loves progress. I think any progress that we achieve as mankind, especially in a good way, moves the kingdom of God closer. It makes things easier and smoother and better. And you see that all over the verses. Like, for example, if you go in chapter 9, this is where you're going to learn about Emer. He's one of my favorite kings. He reigns for 65 years or something like that, where he has this period of righteousness and the people just thrive under him. They prosper exceedingly, is what the verse says in 16. And that there's all kinds of different prosperity. That's why I call it a renaissance, because I picture, the food getting better and more sustaining. I picture crops growing better. I picture the fabrics that they use to wear clothing feeling softer and more maneuverable and stretchier. And, that's what progress does. It makes this mortal world better so that you can focus on moving the kingdom of God forward. So I love that you see that in Emer's story. You also get it a little bit later in Ether 10, because this is where you see that succession of righteous kings. There's several of them that come right in a row. One of my favorites is Lib. He comes towards the end of that road, and when he is in power, he is righteous for a long time, and the people become industrious. In fact, let me read you the verse. This is Ether 10:22. And they were exceedingly industrious, and they did buy and sell and traffic one with another that they might get gain. And they did work in all manner of ore, and they did make gold and silver and iron and brass and all manner of metals. And they did dig it out of the earth, wherefore they did cast up mighty heaps of earth to get ore and gold and silver and iron and copper, and they did work all manner of fine work. To me, that verse doesn't necessarily sound judgy. It doesn't sound like, oh, you're right on the cusp of the pride cycle again. I think it's industry. I think it's economics. Like, he's saying, look how the cities are thriving and people are progressing. I think this is how God likes us to be. This is why you see the church innovating in so many cool ways, especially when it comes to technology, because the Lord wants the kingdom of God to move forward. And one of the ways we do that is by innovating and using the tools that he put into our hands and using, the talents that he's blessed us with to further the work of God and do good things in this world. The counter to that is what you see with the adversary. It's interesting to me to see how it plays out in the verses. This is in 8, verse 16. It says, and they were kept up by the power of the devil to administer these oaths to the people and to keep them in darkness. I think Satan rejoices in darkness. He rejoices in stagnation. I think that's what you see in the Middle Ages, when there were so much power grabbing and fighting and kings fighting kings. And, if you think in like England terms, like there's just this stagnant feel to that whole period of history where people aren't progressing because they're focused so much on war. And I think that's what you see in the Jaredite nations as well, that when they are focused on war and on grabbing power and, hoarding power, progress slows and people's lives don't get better. But when there are times of peace, things get brighter because the Lord wants to give you those things. That's his nature. He wants progress. In fact, I don't know if you guys had a chance to listen to Elder Bednar. So he gave a devotional to the young adults last week. I listened to it after my YSAs. I wanted to hear what they had heard. And it was all about technology. In fact, it was a 2.0 version of a talk he gave 15 years ago called Things as They Really Are. And he had some cautions and some warnings, but he also had these awesome ideas about how the Lord loves technology or loves helping man progress. Here's what he said. As sons and daughters of God, each of us has a divine nature and destiny, and has inherited spiritual capacities from him. Our Heavenly Father and his beloved Son are creators, and they have entrusted us immortality, portions of their creative powers. Our particular ability to work and create is significant spiritually precisely because it is central to Heavenly Father's plan and constitutes one of the ultimate expressions of divine potential. President Thomas S. Monson explained, God left the world unfinished for men and women to work their skill upon. He left the electricity in the cloud, the oil in the earth. He left the rivers unbridged and the forests unfelled and the cities unbuilt. God gives to us the challenges of raw materials, not the ease of finished things. He leaves the pictures unpainted and the music unsung and the problems unsolved, that we might know the joys and glories of creation. That's what I think you see in this week's chapters. It's not that the Lord is kick-starting the pride cycle by blessing these people. He wants to make their lives easier. He wants to make their lives more joy-filled so that they can move the work of God forward. I think that's what you see in our day as well. I was thinking back on how this happens for me. I think when we started this course back in 2020, like in the very beginning, it was December of 2019, and Jason and I were trying to troubleshoot and figure out how to do this. I had this idea of this course and he was fully on board. In fact, he pushed me when I was about to chicken out. And we had this conversation and he was like, okay, Maria, how many object lessons do you have right now that you think you could do? Because we knew we wanted to make a course all about creative things. And I said, well, I think I've got 6. And he was like, great, let's get started. And I didn't look too far down the road because I knew if I just stuck it out, if I just tried, the Lord would amplify my efforts and help me create things that didn't exist before. Well, you guys, it's been 5 years since then. I've made over 700 object lessons that didn't exist in 2019. And that doesn't come because of my talents. It comes because the Lord loves progress. He loves when we want to create new ways to teach. He loves all the other teachers who are creating new ways to understand these scriptures and see things. He loves progress, and he wants us to step out of darkness and into light. And I think you see that pattern over and over again. I love the way Elder Bednar phrased it. He said this, always remember that becoming a devoted disciple requires focused, sustained, righteous work. We must strive to become agents who exercise faith in the Savior and act and shun becoming objects that are merely acted upon. Personal revelation requires focused, sustained, and righteous work. We must strive to become agents who exercise faith in the Savior and act and shun becoming objects that are merely acted upon. Seeking appropriately for the gifts of the Spirit requires focused, sustained, and righteous work. We must strive to become agents who exercise faith in the Savior and act and shun becoming objects that are merely acted upon. To be clear, we do not earn or qualify for God's blessing solely by or through our individual work. God's will and timing determine how and when we receive his tender mercies. But you and I have the spiritual obligation to work, create, and learn for ourselves. When you see people in this week's study learning and creating and working, you see joy in the people. You see progress and prosperity in the people. When you see people under the hand of the adversary, they are stagnant. There's no creating anymore. There's no light anymore. There's no progress anymore. It is this slow descent. I think, to me, one of the sweetest promises of the millennium is that when Satan is bound, there will be a renaissance. These little pockets of renaissance moments that we see in the Jaredite nations will become 1,000 years of renaissance. Because if there's no war and there's no division and there's no fighting among the people, imagine what we could do. If we could take those same talents of people who currently are fighting to get through every day and fighting to have enough food on their table, if we can take those people and we can provide things for them that they could do all kinds of good in this world. Imagine the rate of progress we will have when that evil is trapped and we have opportunities to expand. It will be a renaissance time. And if the Jaredite nation is any indicator of what that will feel like, I can't wait to get there. We're going to head into our questions next. So I've got a series of questions to consider that are based around a few different batches of verses. These first questions come from Ether 6, verse 12. This is when the people are at the beach and they immediately bow down. Remember, they've traveled for almost a year on these barges, and as soon as they get to this beach, their feet hit the sand and they bow and they worship God and praise him. And I love picturing that scene, because imagine what that miracle must feel like. To know that all 8 barges made it safely across. Cousins that you haven't seen in a year, you see again. Babies that have been born along the way that you've never been introduced to. Like, these are people who were tight-knit before they left, and now they've missed each other. It's like this ultimate family reunion on the beach to me. And I love the way it's described. So it says, they did shed tears of joy before the Lord because of the multitude of his tender mercies over them. I thought since Thanksgiving was coming, and you'll probably have an opportunity soon to talk to your families, the big families, about what you're grateful for, maybe this week we'd focus some questions on this one. So tell me, what are your tender mercies that you've seen in just this year? Where have you seen the hand of the Lord just this year, from last Thanksgiving to now? When have you seen them? How did you recognize them, that they were a tender mercy of the Lord? Did your mortal mind try to reconcile them away or explain them away? And if so, how did you get around that? How did you get past those feelings and find divinity in those small moments? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, second question. This comes from Ether 8, around 7 to 10. This is that exchange with Jared and his daughter when she's opening up those old records and trying to tell him that he should pursue secret combinations. It's just kind of interesting to see her motivation. Her dad is sorrowing because he's lost power that wasn't his to start with, that he was trying to steal from his dad. And he's sorrowing, and his daughter hurts for him, I think, and comes up with the solution to alleviate the pain, that this is a way for her dad to shortcut the process and get the power back. Here's what's interesting. Over the course of time, this solution that she presents will destroy everybody. It destroys her dad, it destroys her husband. He becomes terrible and ends up killing one of their sons, and then their other sons battle against each other. It destroys everybody but 30 people, essentially. And all of them are wiped out. So my question is this: how does Satan use good motives to tempt us to do sinful things? I think her motive, or her heart, may have been in the right place, but Satan took advantage of that motive and targeted it in the wrong direction. How do we guard against this, you guys? What do you do in order to keep those emotions in check, or to use them only in God's way? How do the 2 great commandments help you know how to channel those emotions for good? I'd just love to hear thoughts about this exchange with the daughter and how we could avoid this for ourselves. Okay, third question. This comes from Ether 11, verses 12 and 13-ish. This is in the days of King Etham. So this is towards the end, when you see the Lord has been in relentless pursuit of the Jaredites for many generations. He continues to send prophets, and they're continually rejected. Some chapters, the prophets are murdered. Sometimes they're thrown in pits and left for dead. Sometimes they're just ignored. In this particular chapter, under the reign of King Etham, they are rejected, and there's this interesting reaction that happens. This is verse 13. And it came to pass that the people hardened their hearts and would not hearken unto their words. And the prophets mourned and withdrew from the people. It's interesting to me that they withdraw. They pull away because the people don't want to hear their message anymore. And I find it really interesting that even in the next generation, more prophets are sent. They're also rejected. In the next generation, Ether is sent. He'll be this mighty prophet who all the people will reject. And I guess the pattern was sort of interesting to me. Here's my series of questions. Do you think this happens today? We know that this work is going to roll forward no matter what. But that doesn't mean that prophets don't withdraw to some degree. And I want to know if you think that happens now. I don't think they're ever pulled from the earth, but I do think there is sometimes a withdrawal from certain areas or certain reactions they get from people. Do you see this? Prophets withdrawing. What causes a prophet's heart to mourn today? And can you mourn and maintain a sense of rest and optimism simultaneously? I'm curious about your thoughts on this, because the prophets and the apostles are so bright. They are so optimistic, and they face so much so much opposition, so much mocking and misuse of their words. And how do you hold mourning and optimism and hope in the same space at the same time? I would love to know your thoughts. You can either put them on the YouTube comment thread, or if you're in the course with me, you can go over and leave them on the Insights video so we can have a chat over there. All right, I'd love to know your thoughts. We're going to head into the object lessons next, but one more little thought for you. This week, I was struggling with work. I was behind. Got a lot of factors caused that, but there was this knock at the door. And I immediately was going to hide in my office and ignore the knock because I needed to get my work done, and I didn't want to mess with whoever was at the door, whether it be a package or a kid that wanted to play with my kids. Or I just figured I could ignore the knock. And then the knock came again, and I was like, oh, fine, I'll get over it and I'll open the door. I opened the door, and Violet's best friend, who happens to be the daughter of my ministering sister, the one that takes care of me, had this delicious swig in her hands, and she just wanted to give it to me. She didn't even want to stay and play. And in my hands, I had, well, for lack of a better term, the caffeine that I needed in order to do the work that I needed to get done that day. And it was interesting to me to think about what could have happened had I never opened the door. I think I certainly would have made it, and the work would have gotten done eventually, but it would have been much less delightful. Thanks to Camille, my workload was easier. And I actually think that's the pattern you see all over this week's chapters. You're going to see the Lord have this light, like he wants to give these people blessings. He has them prepared and ready. He wants to make their lives more industrious, and their tools lighter, and their burdens less heavy. He wants to give them all these gifts, and he stands at the door and he knocks. And because they're so busy with the work of war, or the work of worrying about their pride or their other issues, they don't come to the door, and they don't take the gift that he has ready for them to lighten their load. And I think this week is an invitation to open the door. He stands at the door and knocks, and what he offers is something that will lighten every burden you carry. But you have to set down work in order to get there. I had to set down and step away from work in order to access the help that I needed that day. And that's his invitation in these verses as well. I think when we don't come to the door, he doesn't leave, but he does mourn a little bit. I think he mourns and he waits for us to miss him. And then at some point, we'll turn and we'll need him. But I think he hopes we come to the door when he knocks, so that those blessings are in our hands now. I love the way Elder Renlund phrased it. He said, "But when we get off the path, God is saddened because he knows that this eventually but invariably leads to diminished happiness and forfeited blessings." In the scriptures, getting off the path is referred to as sin, and the resultant decrease in happiness and forfeited blessings is called punishment. I thought that was a fascinating thought. In this sense, God is not punishing us. Punishment is a consequence of our own choices, not his. I think God has a plan of lasting peace and joy for you in this life. He intends to make mortality work for you in this life. And he's got these little opportunities and blessings waiting for you. And he stands at the door and he knocks. And he invites you to step forward, to set down the mortal constraints, the worries that you have about this world, and step towards what will actually lighten the load. He's got it ready, and it's waiting for you. And you find it as you come closer to his word, in the scriptures, in the words of the living prophets, and in those moments of revelation that illuminate you. That's where you're going to find that lift. I found it this week. I think you will too.